Rose Williams froze mid-sip, her morning coffee suspended inches from trembling lips as she watched the impossible unfold in her backyard. The massive python, 18 feet of deadly muscle, should have been crushing the life from the black bear trapped beneath its coils. Instead, the serpent was gently unwrapping the steel jaws of an illegal hunting trap from the bear's mangled paw. The ceramic mug shattered against the porch boards, sending scalding coffee across Rose's slippers. Her arthritic hands gripped the railing as the 78-year-old widow blinked hard, certain her new heart medication was causing hallucinations. But the bear's grateful whimper, so achingly familiar it made her chest tighten with memories of Harold, confirmed this was terrifyingly real. "Well, I'll be jiggered," she whispered, watching natural enemies become unlikely saviors. What kind of miracle had stumbled into her lonely world? And why did that bear's gentle brown eyes remind her so painfully of everything she'd lost? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Rose Williams had been counting sunrises alone for 15 years, ever since Harold lost his battle with lung cancer in the very bed where she still slept on his side every night. At 78, the former elementary school teacher had grown accustomed to conversations with Harold's photograph on the mantel and the cardinals that visited her bird feeder each morning, the only reliable companions in her increasingly small world. The modest cottage, nestled deep in the Florida Everglades, had been Harold's dream retirement home, far from the chaos of suburban Tampa where they'd raised their children. Jennifer lived in Seattle now, a successful lawyer too busy for regular calls, while Michael had built his marketing empire in Boston. Their Christmas cards arrived faithfully, but their voices had become strangers' echoes through rushed phone calls that left Rose feeling more invisible than before. "Another Sunday dinner for one," she'd whispered to Harold's picture just last week, the silence in their tiny kitchen so thick she could taste it. The Medicare statement scattered across the kitchen table told the story of her shrinking world, choosing between blood pressure medication and groceries, between heating bills and phone calls to children who treated her words like symptoms of decline rather than wisdom earned through 7 decades of living. Harold's memory lived strongest in the vegetable garden he'd planted their first spring here. The tomatoes and bell peppers still grew wild and abundant, though Rose's arthritic hands struggled with the harvest. It was Harold who'd first noticed how the local wildlife seemed drawn to their property. Black bears ambling through for fallen mangoes, raccoons washing their dinner in the irrigation ditch, and occasionally massive snakes sunning themselves on the warm concrete of their back patio. "God's creatures need safe harbor too, Rosie," Harold used to say during his final months, watching a family of deer graze peacefully just beyond their kitchen window. His Vietnam nightmares had softened here among the cypress trees and sawgrass, where the only explosions were thunderstorms and the loudest battles involved territorial disputes between blue jays. The Everglades stretched endlessly beyond Rose's back fence, a maze of waterways and wildlife corridors where civilization felt like a distant memory. Her nearest neighbor lived 2 miles away, connected only by a rutted dirt road that became impassable during heavy rains. The isolation that had once felt like freedom now pressed against her chest like a physical weight, especially during the long nights when her irregular heartbeat reminded her how quickly everything could end. This morning had started like every other. Instant coffee, Harold's photo moved to catch the morning light, medication sorted into daily pillboxes, until the impossible scene in her backyard shattered 15 years of predictable solitude. The massive Burmese python she'd occasionally glimpsed in the irrigation canal was real enough, but its behavior defied every nature documentary she'd ever watched. And the bear's eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human, a recognition that made Rose's chest ache with something she couldn't name. "Harold," she whispered to the morning air, "I think you're trying to tell me something." Rose's hands shook as she gripped her walker, navigating the uneven ground toward her backyard, where the impossible scene continued to unfold. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the cypress trees, and the humid Florida air carried the metallic scent of blood mixed with the earthy smell of the Everglades. Her heart hammered against her ribs, whether from exertion, medication, or sheer disbelief, she couldn't tell. The massive python hadn't moved from its protective position around the injured bear. Up close, Rose could see the serpent's intricate diamond patterns, each scale catching the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy above. The bear, a beautiful black bear with intelligent brown eyes, lay still except for the shallow rise and fall of his massive chest. His left hind paw was a mangled mess of torn flesh and fur, the steel teeth of the illegal trap having done their vicious work before the python's intervention. "Easy now," Rose whispered, her voice carrying the same gentle tone she'd used with frightened children during her 40 years of teaching. "I'm not going to hurt either of you." The python's head turned toward her voice, tongue flicking to taste the air. Those ancient eyes held no malice, only what Rose could swear was curiosity. The bear lifted his great head slightly, and when their eyes met, Rose felt a jolt of recognition so strong it nearly knocked her off her feet. Those weren't the eyes of a wild animal. They held the same gentle intelligence she'd seen in Harold's therapy dogs at the VA hospital. "Oh, my stars," she breathed. "You're not wild, are you, honey?" As if responding to her realization, the bear made a soft, huffing sound that sounded almost like agreement. The python remained coiled but relaxed, and Rose found herself taking another step closer. Her rational mind screamed warnings about approaching dangerous wildlife, but something deeper, the same instinct that had made her a beloved teacher, told her these creatures meant no harm. Rose turned back toward her cottage, moving as quickly as her arthritic joints would allow. In Harold's old workshop, she gathered supplies with trembling hands: clean towels, hydrogen peroxide, antibiotic ointment, and a bowl of fresh water. The first aid kit Harold had insisted on keeping fully stocked sat on the workbench where he'd left it, as if waiting for this moment. When she returned to the garden, both animals watched her approach with what seemed like expectation. Rose set the supplies on an overturned flower pot and slowly lowered herself to her knees, ignoring the sharp pain that shot through her joints. "Let's see what we can do about that paw," she murmured, reaching slowly toward the injured bear. The python shifted slightly, allowing Rose better access while maintaining its protective position. The bear, she'd started thinking of him as Teddy, though she couldn't say why, remained perfectly still as Rose began cleaning the wounds. The trap had been designed for smaller game, but had caught the bear's paw perfectly, the serrated teeth leaving deep puncture wounds that would need more care than she could provide. "You need a real doctor," Rose said, looking into those trusting brown eyes. "But this will help for now." As she worked, Rose found herself talking to both animals as if they were old friends. She told them about Harold, about the loneliness that had been eating at her like cancer, about children who'd grown too busy to remember their mother existed. The bear seemed to listen, occasionally making soft sounds that reminded Rose achingly of Harold's gentle murmurs during his final days. When she finished bandaging the paw as best she could, Rose sat back on her heels and really looked at her unlikely patients. The python, she'd decided to call her Seraphina, after the angels Harold used to say watched over them, had never loosened her protective coil around Teddy. It was the most extraordinary thing Rose had ever witnessed, and she'd seen plenty in her 78 years. "I need to make some calls," Rose said, struggling to her feet with the help of her walker. "Y'all stay put now." Inside her cottage, Rose stared at the rotary phone Harold had refused to replace, her finger hovering over the dial. Who could she possibly call? Animal control would tranquilize both animals and separate them. The police would think she'd lost her mind. Her children. Jennifer's last conversation had been about assisted living facilities and the dangers of Rose living alone. Finally, she dialed Dr. Patterson's veterinary clinic. Thomas Patterson had treated Harold's hunting dogs years ago and had a reputation for discretion with the area's more unusual wildlife encounters. "Patterson Veterinary Clinic," came the familiar voice. "Dr. Patterson? This is Rose Williams out on Cypress Creek Road. I need your help with— Well, this might sound strange, but I have a bear and a python in my backyard and— Mrs. Williams." Dr. Patterson's voice took on the condescending tone Rose had grown to hate. "At your age, stress and medication can sometimes cause visual disturbances. Are you taking your heart medication regularly?" Rose's grip tightened on the phone. "Doctor, I may be old, but I'm not senile. This bear is injured and needs medical attention. The python seems to be protecting him, and I need someone who can help without separating them." "I see." There was a long pause. "Mrs. Williams, I think perhaps you should call one of your children." This kind of confusion isn't uncommon with the medications you're taking. "Thomas Patterson, I taught your mother in 3rd grade and she raised you better than to dismiss an elderly woman's concerns as confusion," Rose snapped. "If you won't help, I'll call the newspaper. I'm sure they'd be interested in a story about a veterinarian who refuses to treat injured wildlife." Another pause, then a sigh. "All right, Mrs. Williams, I'll drive out tomorrow morning to assess the situation. But I'm bringing proper equipment in case these animals need to be relocated for everyone's safety." After hanging up, Rose returned to her backyard to find both animals exactly where she'd left them. Serafina had moved slightly to better shade Teddy from the afternoon sun, and the bear's breathing seemed less labored. Rose settled into Harold's old lawn chair, content to keep watch over her unexpected guests. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Rose felt something she hadn't experienced since Harold's death. Purpose. These two unlikely friends had found their way to her garden for a reason. Harold had always believed in signs, in the idea that God worked through the most unexpected messengers. "Whatever brought you here," Rose whispered to the gathering dusk, "I won't let anything happen to you. That's a promise." Miles away, a rusted pickup truck pulled into the parking lot of Patterson Veterinary Clinic. Marcus Thompson sat behind the wheel, his weathered hands gripping a photograph of a smiling 7-year-old girl holding a stuffed bear. When his cell phone rang, he answered on the first ring. "She called," came Dr. Patterson's nervous voice. "The bear's there, just like you said it would be." Dr. Patterson's veterinary truck rumbled up Rose's gravel driveway at precisely 8 o'clock the next morning, kicking up clouds of dust that settled on the dew-covered wildflowers lining the path. Rose watched from her kitchen window as he unloaded a tranquilizer gun and a large metal cage from the truck bed, her stomach knotting with dread. This wasn't the compassionate house call she'd hoped for. This was a removal operation. "Good morning, Mrs. Williams," Dr. Patterson called out, his voice carrying the forced cheerfulness medical professionals used when humoring difficult patients. He was a tall, thin man in his 50s with prematurely gray hair and the kind of nervous energy that made Rose think of a caged animal. "Ready to show me these visitors of yours?" Rose led him around to the backyard, her walker catching on roots and uneven ground. To her relief, Teddy and Serafina were exactly where she'd left them the night before. The python had repositioned herself to catch the morning sun while maintaining her protective coil around the bear, who lifted his massive head at their approach. The makeshift bandage Rose had applied to his injured paw was still in place, though stained with dried blood. Dr. Patterson stopped dead in his tracks, the tranquilizer gun nearly slipping from his hands. "Sweet Mother of God," he breathed, his professional skepticism evaporating instantly. "They're real. Did you think I was making it up?" Rose asked, though she could understand his shock. Even having witnessed it herself, the sight of natural enemies caring for each other defied everything she knew about wildlife behavior. "Doctor." Patterson set down his equipment and pulled out his phone, taking several photos before remembering his professional duties. "Mrs. Williams, this is unprecedented. I've never seen behavior like this between a python and a bear. The snake should have either attacked or fled, not—" He gestured helplessly at the protective coil. "She's been taking care of him all night," Rose said, settling into her lawn chair. "Keeping him warm, shading him when the sun got too hot. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Dr. Patterson knelt at a safe distance, examining the scene with growing amazement. The bear's injuries are consistent with a steel jaw trap, probably set illegally, but look at how calm he is with human presence. This isn't typical wild bear behavior. He paused, studying Teddy's face. There's something familiar about him. Rose watched as Dr. Patterson pulled on surgical gloves and slowly approached the pair. To her amazement, both animals remained calm, with Serafina actually loosening her coils to allow better access to Teddy's injured paw. The veterinarian's examination was gentle but thorough, and Rose could see his professional admiration growing by the minute. "The python's presence is actually helping," Dr. Patterson murmured. "She's applying just enough pressure to prevent excessive swelling while providing warmth and comfort. It's like she understands basic first aid." He looked up at Rose with newfound respect. "You were right to call me. This bear needs surgical attention, but separating them could cause psychological trauma to both animals." Relief flooded through Rose's chest. "So, you'll help them? Together?" Dr. Patterson hesitated, his eyes darting toward his truck where the cage waited. "It's complicated, Mrs. Williams. There are regulations about wildlife care, especially with exotic species like this python. And the bear, if he was someone's pet before, there could be legal issues." "What aren't you telling me?" Rose asked, recognizing the evasive tone she'd heard from doctors during Harold's illness. "Doctor—" Patterson stood and walked toward his truck, ostensibly to gather more supplies, but Rose noticed him making a phone call with his back turned. She couldn't hear the words, but his body language spoke volumes: hunched shoulders, nervous gestures, the kind of conversation no one wanted overheard. When he returned, Dr. Patterson's demeanor had shifted. "Mrs. Williams, I need to ask you some questions about how long these animals have been on your property. There have been reports of a potentially dangerous bear in the area, and if this is the same animal—" "Dangerous?" Rose's voice rose in disbelief. "That bear is as gentle as a lamb. He let me tend his wounds without so much as a growl. Sometimes animals that have been domesticated can be unpredictable when they revert to wild behavior," Dr. Patterson said, avoiding her eyes. "For everyone's safety, it might be best if—" The sound of another vehicle approaching interrupted him. Through the cypress trees, Rose could see a battered pickup truck making its way slowly up her driveway. "Doctor?" Patterson's face went pale, and Rose noticed his hands were shaking as he reached for the tranquilizer gun. "Who's that?" Rose demanded. "Nobody," Dr. Patterson said quickly. "Probably just someone who got lost." But the truck didn't continue past. It stopped at the edge of Rose's property, and a man got out, tall, bearded, wearing camouflage clothing and carrying what looked like hunting equipment. Even from a distance, Rose could see the intensity in his movements, the focused purpose of a predator stalking prey. "Dr. Patterson," Rose said slowly, pieces of a terrible puzzle beginning to fall into place. "Who did you call?" Before he could answer, Teddy suddenly became agitated. The bear's head swiveled toward the approaching stranger, and a low growl rumbled from his chest, the first aggressive sound Rose had heard him make. Serafina responded immediately, tightening her protective coils and raising her head in a defensive posture. "They know him," Rose whispered, watching the animal's reaction with growing horror. "They know that man, and they're afraid." Dr. Patterson grabbed Rose's arm with surprising strength. "Mrs. Williams, you need to go inside. Now. This situation is more complicated than you understand." "Get your hands off me!" Rose snapped, jerking away from his grip. "What have you done? Who is that man?" The stranger was close enough now that Rose could see his face, weathered and grim, with the hollow-eyed look of someone consumed by grief or obsession. He carried a high-powered rifle and wore the kind of tactical gear she'd seen in military documentaries. This wasn't a lost tourist or curious neighbor. This was someone who'd come prepared for war. "His name is Marcus Thompson," Dr. Patterson said quietly, his guilt finally overwhelming his fear. "He's been tracking this bear for 3 years. He believes the bear killed his daughter." Rose felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Killed his daughter? Teddy wouldn't hurt a fly. Mrs. Williams, you need to understand, I owe money to some very dangerous people. Marcus offered to clear my debts if I could locate the bear. I didn't realize you'd become attached." The betrayal hit Rose like a physical blow. "You used me. You used a lonely old woman to set a trap." "I'm sorry," Dr. Patterson said, and she could hear the genuine anguish in his voice. "But it's too late now. Marcus won't leave without that bear." As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus Thompson emerged from the tree line into Rose's backyard. Up close, Rose could see the madness lurking behind his eyes, the kind of consuming rage that had burned away everything human and left only vengeance behind. He raised the rifle, aiming directly at Teddy's head. "Finally," Marcus said, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man whose obsession was about to be satisfied. 3 years I've been hunting you, you murdering bastard." "Wait!" Rose stepped between the rifle and the animals, her walker scraping against the ground. "You can't just shoot him. He's injured and defenseless." Marcus's laugh was bitter and hollow. "Defenseless? Lady, that monster killed my little girl. My Emma loved bears, had a stuffed bear she carried everywhere. I should have known it was an omen." Rose studied Marcus's face, seeing past the anger to the grief beneath. What really happened to Emma? For a moment something flickered across Marcus's features. Doubt, perhaps, or a memory too painful to face. But then his grip tightened on the rifle. That bear killed her. And now it's going to pay. Behind Rose, Serafina hissed, not in aggression, but in what sounded almost like mourning. Teddy's growl had faded to a whimper of recognition and fear. These animals knew their executioner was here, and they were prepared to face their fate together. "Over my dead body," Rose said quietly, gripping her walker and standing as tall as her arthritic spine would allow. The standoff in Rose's backyard stretched into an unbearable silence, broken only by the distant calls of herons and the rustle of sawgrass in the humid morning breeze. Marcus Thompson kept his rifle trained on Teddy, while Rose positioned herself as a human shield, her frail body trembling but resolute. Dr. Patterson stood frozen between them, his veterinary oath warring with his financial desperation. "Ma'am, you need to step aside," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weary patience of a man who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "That bear is a killer, and I won't let it hurt anyone else." "The only killer I see is the man pointing a gun at an injured animal," Rose replied, her elementary school teacher voice carrying an authority that made Marcus hesitate. "What kind of man hunts down a creature that can't even stand?" Marcus's jaw clenched. "You don't understand. My Emma, she was only 7 years old. We were on a camping trip, father-daughter time, and that monster came out of nowhere, ripped her apart while I was getting firewood." His voice cracked on the last words. "I found pieces of her little pink jacket scattered across 50 yards of forest floor." Rose felt her heart squeeze with unexpected sympathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Losing a child is every parent's worst nightmare. But honey, look at him." She gestured toward Teddy, who lay motionless except for his labored breathing. "Does that look like a vicious killer to you?" "Evil things can look innocent," Marcus spat. "That's what makes them dangerous." But Rose noticed something Marcus hadn't. The way Teddy's eyes followed every movement, not with predatory calculation, but with something that looked almost like recognition. The bear wasn't preparing to attack. He was cowering like a beaten dog who expected more punishment. "Dr. Patterson," Rose said without taking her eyes off Marcus, "tell me the truth. Have there been any recorded bear attacks in this area in the past 5 years?" Dr. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. "Well, no, but—" "Any missing persons reports? Any evidence of aggressive bear behavior toward humans?" "Mrs. Williams, please don't make this harder than it has to be," Dr. Patterson pleaded. "Answer me," Rose commanded, her teacher voice cutting through his protests. "No," Dr. Patterson admitted quietly. "No reported incidents." Marcus's rifle wavered slightly. "That doesn't mean anything. Bears are smart. They hide their kills." Rose studied Marcus more carefully, noting the way his hands shook, the dark circles under his eyes, the faint smell of alcohol that clung to his clothes despite the early hour. This wasn't just grief. This was a man consumed by guilt wearing the mask of vengeance. Over the next 3 days, an uneasy routine developed. Marcus set up camp on the edge of Rose's property, just beyond the legal boundary where she couldn't have him arrested for trespassing. He watched constantly through binoculars, waiting for his moment, while Rose maintained her vigil over Teddy and Serafina. Dr. Patterson visited daily, ostensibly to check on the bear's healing, but really to serve as reluctant mediator in the standoff. Rose could see the internal war playing out on his face, the veterinarian who'd taken an oath to do no harm wrestling with the gambling addict who owed money to dangerous people. "His paw is healing remarkably well," Dr. Patterson reported on the 3rd day, examining Teddy's bandaged foot while Serafina maintained her protective coil. "The python's presence is actually accelerating recovery. She's maintaining optimal temperature and pressure, almost like she understands wound care." "She understands love," Rose corrected, settling into her lawn chair with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "Same as any mother caring for her child." "They're not mother and child," Dr. Patterson protested. "They're different species. This behavior is unprecedented in the literature." "Maybe your literature needs updating," Rose said dryly. She'd been doing her own research, calling in favors from her former teaching colleagues who now worked in libraries and universities. What she'd learned made her more certain than ever that Teddy was no wild animal. That evening, as sunset painted the Everglades in shades of amber and rose, Rose made her decision. She'd been watching Marcus through her kitchen window, seeing him clean and recount his rifles with obsessive precision. The man was building toward something, and she couldn't wait for tragedy to force the truth into the open. "I'm going to talk to him," she announced to Dr. Patterson, who had stayed late to change Teddy's bandages. "Mrs. Williams, I really don't think—" "Harold always said the best way to defuse a bomb is to understand what's making it tick," Rose interrupted, pulling on her cardigan despite the humid heat. "That man's about to explode with grief, and when he does, everybody's going to get hurt." She found Marcus sitting beside his truck, staring at a photograph by the light of a camping lantern. When Rose approached, he quickly tucked the picture into his shirt pocket, but not before she caught a glimpse of a gap-toothed little girl hugging a stuffed bear. Mind if an old lady sits a spell? Rose asked, gesturing to a fallen log nearby. Marcus shrugged, which she took as permission. For several minutes they sat in silence, listening to the night sounds of the Everglades, the splash of alligators in distant water, the haunting cry of a screech owl, the rustle of small creatures moving through the undergrowth. "She was beautiful," Rose finally said. "Your Emma. I saw her picture." Marcus's whole body tensed. "Don't. I lost someone too," Rose continued gently. "My Harold. Took 15 years to work up the courage to say his name out loud to a stranger." She pulled out her own photograph. Harold in his army uniform, young and smiling before Vietnam changed him. Cancer took him, slow and cruel. For the longest time I blamed God, blamed the doctors, blamed Harold himself for smoking those damned cigarettes. "It's not the same thing," Marcus said roughly. "You're right. Natural death is different from violence. But the anger feels the same, doesn't it? Like a fire in your chest that never goes out, just burns hotter and hotter until you can't think straight." Marcus was quiet for so long, Rose wondered if he'd heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I dream about her every night. She's calling for her daddy and I can't find her. I wake up screaming her name." "Tell me what really happened that day," Rose said. "I told you. Tell me the truth this time." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "You don't know what you're asking. I know a man carrying guilt this heavy didn't have his daughter killed by a bear," Rose said quietly. "I know because I've seen how gentle that bear is, and I know because you've been hunting him for 3 years instead of calling proper authorities. A father who lost his child to a wild animal attack would want every bear in the state investigated. You just want that one specific bear dead." Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of the lantern's light. "You need to go back to your house, old woman. This isn't your business." "It became my business when you brought guns onto my property to kill an animal I'm protecting," Rose replied calmly. "And it became my business when I realized you're not hunting a killer, you're trying to bury a secret." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He spun around, his face twisted with anguish. "You don't understand. She loved that bear, Emma. She called him Teddy, carried him everywhere. He was supposed to be her friend." Rose's heart began pounding as pieces of a horrible puzzle clicked into place. Teddy wasn't wild, was he? He was Emma's pet. "Not a pet," Marcus said brokenly. "Therapy animal. For my PTSD. 3 tours in Afghanistan left me pretty messed up, couldn't sleep, couldn't work. The VA program paired me with this bear cub who'd been orphaned by poachers. Teddy was trained to detect anxiety attacks, provide emotional support." "What happened, Marcus?" "Emma loved him so much. More than she loved me sometimes, I think. She'd curl up against him when she had nightmares, and he'd wrap those big arms around her like she was his own cub." Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "The day she died, I'd been drinking. Wasn't supposed to drink on the medication, but the nightmares were getting worse and the pills weren't helping." Rose waited, letting him find the words. "We were at our hunting cabin. Emma wanted to show Teddy how to fish in the creek. I was cleaning my rifle, had a few too many beers, and I heard her screaming. When I ran outside, I saw Teddy on top of her by the water. I thought, God help me, I thought he was attacking her. But he wasn't," Rose said softly. "She'd fallen in the creek, hit her head on a rock. Teddy was trying to pull her out, but I was too drunk and too scared to see that. I shot him." Marcus's voice broke completely. "Shot him 3 times before I realized what I'd done. But it was too late for Emma. She'd already drowned while I was getting my gun." Rose felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, honey." "Teddy didn't die from the gunshot wounds. He dragged himself into the woods and I was too much of a coward to follow. I told everyone a wild bear had attacked, that I'd driven it off but couldn't save Emma in time. The insurance paid out. Everyone called me a hero for surviving a bear attack. but you knew the truth. I killed my daughter's best friend while she drowned 10 feet away from me." Marcus collapsed back onto the log, his whole body shaking. "I've been hunting him ever since, telling myself I was protecting other people. But really, I just wanted to finish what I started. Put him out of his misery and mine." Rose reached over and took his hand, surprised by how cold his fingers were despite the warm night. "Marcus, that bear forgave you a long time ago. The question is whether you can forgive yourself." In the distance, they could hear Serafina's distinctive hiss, not aggressive, but mournful, as if she somehow understood that the conversation 20 yards away was determining the fate of the creature she protected. "He remembers me," Marcus said. "I see it in his eyes. He knows I'm the one who shot him, who abandoned him to die alone in the woods. And yet he hasn't attacked you, not once in 3 years of you hunting him. Maybe he's planning something." Rose squeezed his hand. "Or maybe he's hoping his daddy will finally come home." The words hung in the humid air between them, heavy with possibility and redemption. In the distance, Teddy made a sound Rose had never heard before, a low, keening call that sounded almost like a name being called across a great distance. Marcus jerked to his feet. I can't." "Yes, you can," Rose said firmly. "Tomorrow morning, you're going to walk into that garden and say goodbye properly. You're going to ask his forgiveness and you're going to let him give it." "What if he attacks?" Rose smiled through her tears. "Honey, if that bear wanted you dead, you'd have been dead 3 years ago. He's been waiting for you to come home." Dawn broke over the Everglades with the kind of golden light that made everything look sacred, but the beauty was lost on Marcus Thompson as he stood at the edge of Rose's garden, his hunting rifle trembling in his hands. He'd spent the sleepless night staring at Emma's photograph, her gap-toothed smile a constant reminder of everything he'd destroyed with his cowardice and lies. Rose emerged from her cottage carrying a thermos of coffee and Harold's old folding chair, moving slowly but with determined purpose. She'd been awake since 3 o'clock, praying to a God she sometimes doubted and talking to Harold's photograph until the words ran out and only silence remained. "You don't have to do this alone," she said quietly, setting the chair beside Marcus and pouring coffee into the thermos cap. "Harold used to say courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're terrified." Marcus accepted the coffee with shaking hands, his eyes never leaving the spot where Teddy and Serafina lay in their protective embrace. The bear's breathing was stronger now, his injured paw healing remarkably under the python's constant care. But it was the way Teddy's ears perked up at Marcus's voice that nearly broke the man's resolve. "He knows I'm here," Marcus whispered. "He's known you were here for 3 days," Rose replied. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Dr. Patterson arrived just as the morning mist began lifting from the sawgrass, his veterinary truck loaded with supplies he hoped he wouldn't need. The guilt of his betrayal sat heavy on his shoulders, but the night had given him time to think, to remember why he'd become a veterinarian in the first place. Some debts, he'd realized, were worth more than money. "How's our patient?" he asked Rose, though his eyes remained fixed on Marcus and the rifle. "Healing in more ways than one, I think," Rose said carefully. "Aren't you, Marcus?" Marcus set down his coffee and took a step forward, then another. Serafina's massive head rose at his approach, her forked tongue tasting the air, but she didn't coil more tightly around Teddy. Instead, she seemed to be watching, waiting, as if she understood this moment's significance. "Emma used to sing to you," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "That song from the Disney movie, Bare Necessities. She'd change the words to Teddy Necessities, and you'd do this little dance thing with your front paws." Teddy's response was immediate and heartbreaking. The massive bear lifted his head and made a soft, huffing sound, the same sound he'd made whenever Emma had called his name. His dark eyes locked onto Marcus's face with an intensity that spoke of memory, recognition, and something that might have been hope. "Oh, I'm so sorry, buddy," Marcus whispered, falling to his knees 10 feet away from the animals. "I'm so goddamn sorry for everything." Rose felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched 3 years of anguish begin to crack open like an infected wound, finally ready to drain. Dr. Patterson set down his medical bag and stood silent witness to something that would change all their lives forever. "The day Emma died," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger, "you were trying to save her. I know that now. You were trying to pull her out of the creek, and I shot you for it. I shot you because I was drunk and stupid and too broken to see what was really happening." Serafina began to uncoil slowly, her movements deliberate and careful. She wasn't abandoning Teddy, Rose realized. She was giving him space to make his own choice. The python positioned herself where she could still protect if needed, but where she wouldn't interfere with whatever reconciliation might be possible. "I told everyone you attacked her," Marcus said, his words coming faster now, like poison being drawn from a wound. "I let them think you were some kind of monster, so they wouldn't ask too many questions about why I was drunk when I was supposed to be watching my baby girl. I took the insurance money and used it to hunt you down like you were the villain in this story." Teddy made another sound, deeper this time, and shifted his weight. Dr. Patterson tensed, ready to intervene if the bear showed any signs of aggression, but Rose placed a calming hand on his arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Let this happen." With painful slowness, Teddy began to move toward Marcus. His injured paw made him awkward, but his intention was clear. Serafina followed at a distance, ready to intervene if needed, but her posture remained alert rather than aggressive. Marcus didn't move as 600 pounds of black bear approached him. He'd dropped the rifle and sat completely still, tears streaming down his bearded face. "Emma loved you so much," he said. "She used to tell people you were her best friend, her protector. And I killed that. I killed her best friend." When Teddy was close enough to touch, the bear did something that made Rose's heart nearly stop. He extended one massive paw and gently touched Marcus's shoulder, the same gesture he'd used to comfort Emma when she'd had nightmares. The contact broke something fundamental inside Marcus. He collapsed forward, sobbing against Teddy's chest while the bear wrapped both front legs around him in an embrace that spoke of forgiveness beyond human understanding. Rose had to cover her mouth to muffle her own sobs as she watched a broken man and a betrayed animal find their way back to each other. "I missed you so much, buddy," Marcus whispered into Teddy's fur. "I missed you, and I was too ashamed to admit it. Emma would be so mad at me for hurting you." Dr. Patterson cleared his throat softly. "Marcus, there's something you should know. This bear, Teddy, he's been protecting other animals in this area. Small creatures, injured wildlife. He's been acting like a guardian, not a predator." "Emma always said you had a good heart," Marcus said, pulling back to look into Teddy's eyes. "She said you could tell when people were sad and you tried to make them feel better." Rose watched in amazement as Serafina slowly approached the reunited friends. Instead of seeing Marcus as a threat, the python seemed to recognize him as part of Teddy's family. She coiled nearby, close enough to provide warmth and comfort, but not intruding on their reunion. "I need to tell the truth," Marcus said suddenly, looking up at Rose and Dr. Patterson. "About Emma, about the accident, about everything. I need to stop lying." "The insurance company will want their money back," Dr. Patterson warned. "Let them have it," Marcus replied. "I never should have taken it in the first place." Rose felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the Florida sun. This was what Harold had always talked about, moments of grace when broken people found the courage to choose healing over hiding, truth over comfort. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus looked down at Teddy, who was resting his great head against Marcus's shoulder. "I don't know. I gave up my hunting licenses, sold most of my guns to pay for the search. I've got nothing left except a truck and a campsite." "You've got family," Rose said firmly, "right here. Mrs. Williams, Rose, and I mean it, this property has been too quiet since Harold died. Could use some life around here." Dr. Patterson knelt beside the trio, his professional instincts overriding his emotional response. "Teddy's paw needs regular care for the next few weeks, and there are legal considerations. He was never officially registered as a therapy animal after the VA program ended. Serafina is technically an invasive species, though her behavior suggests she's not a threat to the ecosystem." "What are you saying?" Rose asked. "I'm saying that if someone were to apply for a wildlife rehabilitation permit, and if certain paperwork were to get lost in the bureaucratic shuffle, it might be possible for these animals to stay here legally, under proper supervision, of course." Rose smiled for the first time in days. "Dr. Patterson, are you suggesting we bend some rules?" "I'm suggesting that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't exactly the same, and that 30 years of veterinary practice has taught me the difference." He paused, looking at Marcus. "I'll also be needing to confess my role in this whole mess to the authorities. The gambling debts, the information I passed along. I'm probably going to lose my license." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Rose said fiercely. "You made a mistake, but you're trying to make it right. That counts for something." As the morning progressed into afternoon, the 4 humans and 2 animals settled into something that felt like family. Marcus shared stories about Emma and Teddy's early days together, while Rose prepared a lunch that could accommodate both human and animal dietary needs. Dr. Patterson examined both creatures thoroughly, marveling at their bond and their remarkable health despite their ordeal. "Emma would love this," Marcus said, watching Serafina and Teddy share a pile of fresh fruit Rose had brought from her garden. "She always said animals were better people than most people." "Smart girl," Rose replied, thinking of Harold's similar philosophy. As the sun began to set over the Everglades, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Rose felt something she hadn't experienced since Harold's death: completeness. Her little cottage was full of voices again, her garden alive with purpose, her heart no longer empty. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly as they all watched Teddy and Serafina settle in for the night, still maintaining their protective embrace. "For what? For seeing what I couldn't. For believing in forgiveness when I couldn't believe in it myself." Rose patted his shoulder with the same gentle authority she'd used with thousands of students over the years. "That's what family does, honey. We see the best in each other even when we can't see it in ourselves." The peace that had settled over Rose's property lasted exactly 4 days before everything went catastrophically wrong. It began with a phone call that shattered the morning quiet like a gunshot through glass, the shrill ring of Rose's old rotary phone cutting through the gentle sounds of Teddy and Serafina's breakfast routine in the garden. "Mrs. Williams, this is Sheriff Davidson," came the grave voice on the other end. "We've received reports about dangerous wildlife on your property, and I'm afraid we're going to need to investigate." Rose's blood turned to ice water in her veins. "What kind of reports?" "Anonymous tip came in yesterday about an illegal exotic animal operation. Caller claimed you were harboring a large python and an aggressive bear without proper permits." The sheriff's voice carried the weariness of a man who'd handled too many difficult situations. "I have to bring a team out there, Mrs. Williams." "It's out of my hands now." Through her kitchen window, Rose could see Marcus helping Dr. Patterson change Teddy's bandages while Serafina basked in a patch of morning sunlight. The scene looked like something from a children's book about unlikely friendship, peaceful, healing, beautiful. The thought of armed officers descending on this sanctuary made her stomach clench with dread. "Sheriff, these animals aren't dangerous. They're recovering from injuries, and they have proper veterinary care." "Ma'am, I understand you've grown attached, but a Burmese python and a black bear represent a significant public safety risk. We'll be there within the hour with Florida Wildlife Conservation officers and proper containment equipment." The line went dead, leaving Rose staring at the phone receiver as if it might sprout fangs and bite her. Outside, she could hear Marcus laughing at something Teddy had done, the first genuine laughter she'd heard from him since their tearful reunion. The sound made what she had to do next feel like a betrayal of everything they'd built together. "Marcus," she called out, her voice cracking. "Dr. Patterson. Y'all need to come in here right now." The urgency in her tone brought them running, Marcus's face already tight with concern, while Dr. Patterson carried his medical bag as if expecting an emergency. When Rose explained the sheriff's call, the color drained from both men's faces. "They'll separate them," Dr. Patterson said immediately. "Standard protocol is to isolate exotic animals for quarantine and evaluation. Teddy will go to a wildlife facility, Serafina to, well, they'll probably euthanize her as an invasive species." "Over my dead body," Rose said fiercely. But even as she spoke the words, she could hear the distant rumble of multiple vehicles approaching on the gravel road. Marcus was already moving toward his truck, his face grim with purpose. "I can get them out of here." "Take them deeper into the Everglades where no one will find them." "And then what?" Dr. Patterson demanded. "Teddy's paw isn't fully healed. He needs continued medical care, proper nutrition. You'd be condemning them to a slow death in the swamp." "Better than a fast death in government custody," Marcus shot back. The sound of car doors slamming cut through their argument. Through the front windows, Rose could see a convoy of official vehicles, Sheriff's Department, Wildlife Conservation, and what looked like animal control with a large transport truck. Armed officers were already spreading out to secure the perimeter of her property. "There's no time," Rose said, her mind racing through impossible options. "They're here." Sheriff Davidson was a good man who'd known Harold personally, but he approached Rose's front door with the rigid posture of someone following unwelcome orders. Behind him, Rose could see wildlife officers carrying tranquilizer guns and steel cages that made her heart break just looking at them. "Mrs. Williams, I need you to stay inside while we secure the animals," Sheriff Davidson said when Rose opened the door. "For your own safety." "Those animals are part of my family," Rose replied, gripping her walker so tightly her knuckles went white. "They're not aggressive. They're healing." "Ma'am, I understand your attachment, but regulations are clear about exotic species. We have reports that these animals may have been involved in previous incidents." "What incidents?" Marcus stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "I'm the one who's been tracking that bear for 3 years, and I can tell you he's never hurt anyone." The lead wildlife officer, a stern woman in her 40s named Captain Rodriguez, consulted her clipboard with official indifference. "Mr. Thompson, according to our files, you reported this same bear is responsible for your daughter's death in 2021. Now you're claiming he's harmless?" The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Rose watched Marcus struggle with the weight of 3 years of lies finally coming home to roost. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides as he fought an internal battle between self-preservation and truth. "The report was wrong," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sorry?" "I said the report was wrong." Marcus's voice grew stronger, carrying the authority of a man finally ready to face his demons. "That bear didn't kill my daughter. I lied in the original statement." Captain Rodriguez looked up from her clipboard, her professional composure slipping slightly. "Mr. Thompson, are you recanting your previous testimony about a fatal bear attack?" "Yes, I am." Marcus squared his shoulders. "My daughter drowned in an accident while that bear was trying to save her. I shot him for his trouble, then lied about it to cover my own negligence. Teddy, that bear, he's never hurt anyone. He's a trained therapy animal who's been living peacefully in these woods for 3 years." The admission sent ripples of confusion through the assembled officers. Rose saw Sheriff Davidson and Captain Rodriguez exchange uncertain glances while the tranquilizer team hesitated, suddenly unsure of their target's threat level. "Sir, if you're changing your story about a fatal wildlife encounter, we'll need you to come to the station for a formal statement," Sheriff Davidson said. "But that doesn't change our current mandate regarding these animals." "It should." Dr. Patterson stepped forward, his veterinary credentials giving his words added weight. "If this bear has been misidentified as aggressive based on false information, then the entire premise for this operation is flawed." Captain Rodriguez was already on her radio, calling for clarification from her superiors. Rose could hear fragments of the conversation. "Previous report disputed. Need legal guidance. Therapy, animal registration." While the officials debated protocol, Rose noticed movement in her backyard. Teddy had emerged from his resting spot, somehow sensing the danger surrounding their sanctuary. Serafina followed, her massive body moving with fluid grace as she positioned herself protectively near the bear. "Oh no," Dr. Patterson breathed, following Rose's gaze. "If they see the animals moving around, they'll consider them an active threat." As if summoned by his words, one of the younger wildlife officers spotted the animals and immediately raised his tranquilizer gun. "Target acquired. Large male black bear moving toward the residence." "Wait!" Rose screamed, but her elderly voice was lost in the sudden chaos as multiple officers converged on the backyard. Marcus ran toward Teddy with desperate urgency, placing himself between his former companion and the tranquilizer guns. "Don't shoot! He's responding to my voice. He's not attacking." But the damage was done. In the confusion and shouting, someone's weapon discharged, not a tranquilizer but a real bullet from an officer who'd mistaken Serafina's protective movement for an attack. The shot went wide, striking a cypress tree, but the sound sent every animal in the area into panic mode. Teddy reared up on his hind legs, not in aggression but in confusion and fear, his injured paw making him unsteady. To the officers, it looked like the beginning of a charge. Multiple tranquilizer guns fired simultaneously, their darts finding their mark in Teddy's massive chest. "No!" Marcus's anguished cry echoed across the property as Teddy swayed and collapsed, the powerful sedatives working quickly through his bloodstream. Serafina's response was immediate and heartbreaking. Instead of fleeing or striking at the officers, she coiled her massive body around the unconscious bear, her head raised defensively, but her posture speaking more of grief than aggression. "Stand down! Stand down!" Captain Rodriguez shouted, finally taking control of the situation. "The snake is protecting, not attacking. Nobody move." But it was too late for caution. In the span of 5 minutes, Rose's peaceful sanctuary had become a war zone, and the family she'd fought so hard to protect lay broken in her garden. Teddy's breathing was labored but steady under the influence of the tranquilizers, while Serafina maintained her vigil with the dedication of a mother protecting her child. Rose felt her chest constrict with something that might have been a heart attack or might simply have been the physical manifestation of watching everything she loved being destroyed again. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed into her walker, Dr. Patterson immediately moving to support her. "This is my fault," Marcus said, his voice hollow with self-recrimination. "If I'd told the truth 3 years ago, none of this would have happened." "The truth is what's going to save them now," Rose managed to whisper, her voice barely audible over the sound of her racing heart. But it might be too late. As if to confirm her worst fears, the animal control truck backed up to the edge of her garden, its mechanical winch and steel cage ready to separate the two creatures who had found healing in each other's company. Rose closed her eyes and prayed to Harold, to God, to anyone who might be listening for a miracle she wasn't sure she deserved. The tragedy wasn't just in what was happening, it was in how completely preventable it all had been. The silence that followed the chaos was more deafening than the gunshots had been. Rose sat in her walker, watching through tears as the animal control officers prepared the steel transport cage while Serafina maintained her protective coil around the unconscious Teddy. The python's dark eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human. Grief, loyalty, and desperate determination rolled into one heartbreaking gaze. "Mrs. Williams, you need medical attention," Dr. Patterson said urgently, checking her pulse with professional concern. "Your heart rate is dangerously elevated." "My heart's breaking, not failing," Rose replied, though she couldn't ignore the sharp pain radiating through her chest. "Those animals need me more than I need a hospital." Captain Rodriguez approached carefully, her earlier officiousness replaced by something that looked like genuine regret. "Ma'am, I'm sorry about how this played out, but we have to follow protocol. The bear will be transported to a wildlife rehabilitation facility for evaluation, and the python will be euthanized as an invasive species," Dr. Patterson finished grimly. "Unless there are extraordinary circumstances to justify preservation." "Then we'd better find some extraordinary circumstances," Marcus said, his voice carrying new determination. He pulled out his cell phone with shaking hands. "I'm calling my lawyer. If I'm recanting my original statement about Teddy being dangerous, that changes everything legally." Sheriff Davidson shook his head. "Marcus, even if you change your story, it doesn't erase the fact that these are still unlicensed exotic animals on private property. The regulations exist for public safety." "What about Emma's medical records?" Dr. Patterson asked suddenly. "If Teddy was her registered therapy animal, there should be documentation with the VA hospital system. That would establish his legal status and training history." Rose felt a flicker of hope pierce through her despair. "Marcus, do you still have Emma's therapy animal paperwork?" "It's in storage," Marcus said, already dialing. "Emma's whole room, I boxed it up after. I couldn't bear to throw anything away." While Marcus spoke urgently to someone on the phone, Rose watched the officers struggle with how to separate Serafina from Teddy. Every time they approached with the mechanical winch, the python tightened her protective coil, making it clear that removing one without harming the other was impossible. "She won't leave him," Rose told Captain Rodriguez. "You're going to have to kill her to get her off him." "Ma'am, we're trained to handle situations like this without unnecessary harm to the animals." "No, you're not," Rose interrupted, finding strength in her anger. "You're trained to handle individual aggressive animals. You've never encountered a python protecting a bear because it doesn't happen in nature. This is unprecedented, and your protocols don't account for love." Captain Rodriguez consulted her radio again, her frustration evident as she received conflicting instructions from her supervisors. The unusual situation had clearly caught the bureaucracy off guard, and no one seemed certain how to proceed. "I've got something," Marcus announced, ending his call. "Emma's therapist is driving down from Gainesville with her complete file. Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She ran the VA's animal therapy program. She's the one who originally paired Emma with Teddy." "How long until she gets here?" Dr. Patterson asked. 2 hours, maybe 3, depending on traffic." Captain Rodriguez shook her head. "We can't delay the operation that long. These animals represent a public safety risk." "To who?" Rose demanded, struggling to her feet despite Dr. Patterson's protests. "My nearest neighbor is 2 miles away." The only people at risk are the ones pointing guns at a sedated bear and a python who's protecting him. Mrs. Williams, please. No, you listen to me. Rose's elementary school teacher voice cut through the official protests like a blade. I've lived on this property for 15 years. I've seen bears, alligators, panthers, and every kind of snake Florida has to offer. Never once have I felt threatened by any of them until today, when a bunch of scared men with guns showed up claiming to protect me from animals that have been healing in my garden. Sheriff Davidson held up his hands in a gesture of peace. Rose, I understand you care about these animals, but do you know what Harold's last words to me were? Rose continued, her voice growing stronger despite her physical pain. He said, Rosie, sometimes God sends angels in disguise. Don't be so quick to call them strangers. Well, God sent me a broken bear and a protective python, and you want to call them dangerous. Doctor. And Patterson stepped forward, his veterinary authority lending weight to his words. Captain Rodriguez, I've been treating these animals for a week. The bear shows no signs of aggression despite multiple opportunities. The python has demonstrated protective behavior that's unprecedented in the literature. From a professional standpoint, separating them could cause severe psychological trauma to both animals. And from a legal standpoint, Marcus added, if Teddy's therapy animal status is confirmed, his presence here could be considered a continuation of his original medical assignment. Emma's death doesn't automatically terminate his legal registration. Rose could see the uncertainty spreading through the assembled officers. What had seemed like a straightforward exotic animal removal was becoming a complex legal and ethical minefield. She pressed her advantage. Captain Rodriguez, I want to make you an offer, Rose said, lowering her voice to force everyone to lean in and listen. Give us 3 hours. Let Dr. Mitchell arrive with Emma's files and confirm Teddy's legal status. If the paperwork doesn't check out, I won't fight you taking them. But if it does, we'll work with local authorities to establish proper licensing for both animals. Captain Rodriguez finished, surprising everyone with her flexibility. But Mrs. Williams, they'll have to be monitored, registered, and inspected regularly. This can't be a private zoo. I don't want a zoo, Rose replied firmly. I want a family. The temporary reprieve felt fragile, but it was enough to stop the immediate threat of separation. The officers secured the area but stood down from active capture operations, while Dr. Patterson monitored both animals' vital signs. Teddy remained unconscious but stable, his breathing regular despite the heavy sedation. Serafina never moved from her protective position. Her massive coils remained gentle but immovable around Teddy's sleeping form, her head raised in constant vigilance. Rose found herself talking to the python as she'd once talked to her students during fire drills, calm, reassuring words meant to reduce anxiety. It's going to be okay, sweetheart, Rose murmured, settling into her lawn chair within reaching distance of both animals. Your boy's going to be fine. You just keep taking care of him like you have been. Marcus sat on the ground nearby, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. What if Dr. Mitchell's files don't prove what we need them to prove? Then we'll find another way, Rose said with more confidence than she felt. Harold always said that love finds a way when legal systems fail. Mrs. Williams, Sheriff Davidson approached carefully, I need to ask, what's your long-term plan here? Even if we resolve today's situation, you're 78 years old. These animals could outlive you by decades. The question hit Rose like a physical blow, forcing her to confront a reality she'd been avoiding. What happened to Teddy and Serafina when she was gone? Who would protect them from future bureaucrats and frightened officials? I don't know, she admitted quietly. But I know they deserve better than dying alone in government facilities because they loved each other too much to be separated. As if responding to her words, Serafina shifted slightly, her massive head turning toward Rose. For a moment their eyes met, human and reptile, separated by evolution but connected by something deeper than species. In that gaze, Rose saw recognition, trust, and something that looked remarkably like gratitude. "We're going to figure this out," Rose promised, speaking to Serafina but meaning it for all of them, Marcus, Dr. Patterson, Teddy, and herself. "Whatever it takes, we're going to keep this family together." The words felt like a vow, binding her to a future she couldn't yet imagine but was determined to create. 2 hours until Dr. Mitchell arrived. 2 hours to hold on to hope and pray that love really could conquer bureaucracy. In the distance, storm clouds were gathering over the Everglades, and Rose wondered if they were an omen or just Florida weather being its unpredictable self. Dr. Sarah Mitchell arrived like an answer to prayer, her silver Prius kicking up dust as it pulled into Rose's driveway at exactly 2:47 p.m. She emerged carrying a thick manila folder and the kind of professional authority that made even Captain Rodriguez straighten her posture. At 62, Dr. Mitchell had the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent decades advocating for both veterans and animals in a system that often failed both. "Where's my boy?" she asked Marcus directly, bypassing the assembled officials to focus on what mattered most. Marcus led her to the garden where Teddy lay unconscious in Serafina's protective embrace. Dr. Mitchell's sharp intake of breath was audible as she took in the unprecedented scene, the massive python maintaining her vigil over the sedated bear with the dedication of a trained nurse. "My God," Dr. Mitchell breathed. "In 30 years of animal therapy work, I've never seen anything like this." She knelt beside Teddy, her experienced hands checking his vitals, while Serafina watched but didn't interfere. "He's maintained excellent physical condition despite living wild for 3 years. Someone's been taking care of him." Her eyes met Rose's with newfound respect. "You, I'm guessing." "He found me," Rose replied simply. "Or maybe I found him. Either way, we needed each other." Dr. Mitchell opened her folder and spread Emma's complete therapy file across Rose's patio table. The documentation was extensive: medical records, training certifications, behavioral assessments, and photographs of a younger Teddy working with various patients at the VA hospital. "Theodore, Teddy, was one of our most successful therapy animals," Dr. Mitchell explained to the assembled officials. "Registered under the Americans with Disabilities Act as a psychiatric service animal for Marcus Thompson and his daughter Emma. His training included emotional support, anxiety detection, and crisis intervention." Captain Rodriguez examined the papers carefully. "But wouldn't his registration have expired after the child's death?" "Not automatically," Dr. Mitchell replied. "Service animal registrations remain valid unless formally revoked. Marcus never filed termination paperwork because—" she looked at him with understanding, "because he couldn't face the finality of it." "So Teddy is still legally registered?" Dr. Patterson asked. "As far as the federal database is concerned, yes. And there's more." Dr. Mitchell pulled out a second set of documents. Emma's therapy also involved a companion animal, a young Burmese python named Serafina, part of our experimental exotic animal program. Rose felt her heart skip as the pieces fell into place. Serafina was Emma's too? Emma had severe social anxiety following her father's PTSD episodes, Dr. Mitchell explained. Teddy provided comfort, but Serafina taught her about calm, patient observation. The python was incredibly gentle with children, almost supernaturally so. Marcus stared at Serafina with dawning recognition. That's why she stayed with him. They were partners in Emma's therapy. "More than partners," Dr. Mitchell said softly. "They were trained to work as a team. When Emma died, they lost their primary purpose, caring for her. They've been trying to fulfill that purpose with each other." The revelation hit everyone like lightning. Sheriff Davidson was the first to speak. "So both animals are legally registered therapy animals?" Were, Dr. Mitchell corrected, but their registrations never expired and their behavior demonstrates they've retained their training. The question is whether we can establish new therapeutic assignments. Rose struggled to her feet, her arthritic joints protesting. What if we could? What if we started a formal therapy program right here? You'd need proper facilities, licensing, insurance, Captain Rodriguez began. I'll fund it, Marcus interrupted. Every penny I have left. It's what Emma would have wanted. Dr. Mitchell smiled for the first time since arriving. With proper oversight and my professional endorsement, this could work. A specialized facility for interspecies therapy programs, with Teddy and Serafina as the foundation team. 6 months later, Rose stood in the expanded garden of Harold's Haven Animal Therapy Center, watching her granddaughter Jennifer Jr. read to a group of veteran patients while Teddy and Serafina rested nearby. The facility was small but certified, serving PTSD patients from across Florida who came to experience the healing power of unlikely friendships. Marcus had sold his truck and everything else to fund the center's establishment, moving into Rose's guest room and becoming the facility's groundskeeper. Dr. Patterson served as the resident veterinarian, his gambling debts forgotten in favor of meaningful work. You know what Harold would say if he could see this? Rose asked Marcus, as they watched a young veteran finally smile while petting Serafina's smooth scales. What would he say? Rose grinned, feeling truly happy for the first time in 15 years. He'd say, love always finds a way to multiply. As the Florida sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Rose's unlikely family gathered for their evening ritual, sharing stories, sharing meals, and proving every day that the best healing comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes angels really do come in disguise. At 78, Rose Williams thought her story was over. Another forgotten widow counting sunrises alone while her children lived their busy lives hundreds of miles away. Sound familiar? If you're approaching or enjoying your golden years, you know that hollow feeling when family dinners become phone calls, that become text messages, that become silence. But Rose's story proves it's never too late for a miracle. When she witnessed something impossible in her backyard, a giant python protecting an injured bear, she discovered that family isn't always blood and love doesn't have an expiration date. Sometimes our greatest purpose reveals itself in our later years when we finally have the wisdom to recognize angels in disguise. Rose transformed from an isolated widow choosing between medication and groceries into the founder of a healing sanctuary that touches lives across Florida. Her courage to protect what others called dangerous became her greatest gift to the world. If you're feeling invisible, forgotten, or like your best days are behind you, remember Rose Williams. Your most important chapter might just be waiting to begin. The world needs your experience, your compassion, your unique ability to see hope where others see only problems. Questions for you. What impossible friendship or opportunity have you dismissed that might actually be your next blessing? When did you last feel truly needed and valued for who you are? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.